vision, leadership, workplace-related topics. The Voices of Victory podcast show. Subscribe today. Let's go.
Vision, leadership, self-esteem, workplace-related topics.
Subscribe.
The Voices of Victory podcast show.
Voices of Victory.
Vision,
Voices of Victory.
leadership,
Voices of Victory.
workplace-related topics.
The Voices of Victory.
Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory. Voices of Victory.
It's time for the show. You are now listening to the Voices of Victory podcast show.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mario Di Leone.
Hello and welcome to the Voices of Victory podcast. I'm your host, Mario Di Leone, and today I'm going to blow the absolute roof off of covert narcissism as a term. It has gone completely off the rails. And what the internet has done to human beings over the past, we'll say, 8 or 9 years or more, is polarize us, put us in one far direction or put us in another far direction. In other words, it puts us in places of extreme. So objectivity is needed. So if you're not seeing things objectively, it's probably a good time to start in the way that misinformation is being shoved around out there. Let's talk about covert narcissism. It's a term. It's a real term. It's not a BS term. It is a real psychological research term. It's gone off the rails, though. In popular culture, it has gone absolutely off the rails. It has gone so far away from the truth, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. It started with good intentions. You know, the good intentions of just putting language to the subtle, hard-to-name emotional manipulation that doesn't look like the loud, typical, overt grandiosity that we more often see and associate with narcissists. Instead, this is a completely different angle. Instead of the flashy, arrogant personality, covert narcissism describes something different. Describes something more withdrawn, more emotionally fragile, more manipulative, but in a quiet and subtle and even passive way. And yes, it does indeed have a psychological basis, but it's got blown out of proportion. And I'd like to say that this is referred to overt and covert and all the like little labels that people slap all over stuff. Psychologists call this vulnerable narcissism. And while it's not in its own official diagnosis, in other words, in the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, it does not have its own official diagnosis. Let me say that again. It does not have its official diagnosis, which means people are blowing it all out of proportion. Got it? That's what I'm trying to tell you. And that's the 5th edition, ladies and gentlemen. The Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition. It's a clinically studied subtype of narcissistic personality disorder. A subtype. So what researchers have done is they've used validated tools like hypersensitive narcissism, someone who's like hypersensitive about stuff. They used a hypersensitive scale in order to study it. They have an actual scale, and it is real. It does indeed matter. It does indeed affect lives. But here's the big problem. The internet took it and ran it in social media spaces all over the place. And covert narcissism has been rebranded, relabeled as a catch-all label for anyone who's emotionally unavailable. Anybody who's quote-unquote an avoidant. Anybody who's quote-unquote quiet or even just bad at conflict. It's become a way to diagnose the ex-girlfriend and ex-boyfriend. It's a way to diagnose the parents, the coworkers, even friends after a disagreement. That's the thing. Everybody likes to label. Let's go ahead and label. Let's use another hashtag on people because there isn't enough of them out there, right? Let's go ahead and not be objective. Let's be extremes. Go all the way to one side, polarization, and go to all the way to the other side, polarization. And that's what happens. When we start to look at only certain topics, we develop the horse with the blinders. We only see what our brain will allow us to see. We don't see anything beyond that because we're attaching ourselves to the likes and algorithms that exist out there. So it's just reproducibly feeding us back this limited limited scope of information. And then we look at YouTube's, TikToks, and pop psych blogs, and they're now flooded with phrases like covert narcissist red flags. And you know what? It's presented without a nuance. It's presented without a context. It's presented without going deeper, full understanding. It's surface level. And everybody will say, oh, well, that's got to be the truth then. And it loses its acknowledgement of mental health training. And in this digital rush, this digital gold rush where people are just seeking out these topics to just label and expose and destroy other people, we've stopped asking critical questions because we lean on the extremes. We stopped being curious. We stopped separating behavior patterns from personality disorders. So what's the big risk in all this? The risk is we lose the truth that's drowned within the giant noise out there. People are diagnosing each other without credentials, without true understanding, without true depth, without true comprehension. We're turning complex trauma dynamics into simplistic villain-victim storylines where we take a 5-second snapshot judgment of somebody on the internet and create them out to be the poster child of covert narcissism. And worst of all, we're training ourselves to spot extremes. We're not being objective. We're missing the ordinary human middle ground. Just because someone avoids hard conversation doesn't mean they're a narcissist. Just because someone's quiet about their needs doesn't mean they're manipulative. And just because someone hurt you doesn't mean that they have a personality disorder. Okay, we need more discernment, not more fear. We need more understanding, more clarity. So where do we go from here? Start with questions, not conclusions. Ask, is this truly a pattern, or is this only the pattern I'm seeing right now? Or is this just the moment? Is this harm, or is it hurt? Am I seeing this person clearly, or am I just reacting to my own history, biases, and programming? Let's put light back into this conversation. Let's bring back clarity. Covert narcissism is indeed a real concept, but it deserves better than being twisted into a pop culture weaponized term. We're better than that. And so is the truth. And the truth is you could put a concept under a microscope and blow it completely out of proportion very quickly. And that's what the internet does. And I'm not demonizing the internet. I'm demonizing our discernment, our ability to discern. To have a level of objectivity and discernment is to come to an understanding rather than a quick snapshot judgment. So let's go over a little bit of it. How has it gone off the rails? Well, we have a problem. We have a mindset, we have an action, and we have an execution. The first is the label trap, and that's where we are. We are in what we call the label trap problem, that covert narcissism is being used as a weapon, not as a diagnosis. So the mindset with this is that labels can help us understand, but they're being misused. They limit our clarity, and they're being tossed around. Now, an action you could actually take is pause before labeling somebody. Ask, is this a repeated behavior or isolated pain? And the execution of this is use reflection, not reaction, as your first response. Now, another problem comes in is that diagnosis is not discernment. People are self-diagnosing others based on internet lists. The mindset of this is that clinical tools belong in clinical hands. And the action about this is that it separates traits from disorders. We have to be able to separate those two, traits from disorders. And the execution is you got to trust a trained professional for diagnosis, not just comment sections on YouTube. That's the thing. People of pain will flock with people of pain. It typically happens, and you see the conversations going back and forth. It becomes a hurt versus harm problem, that every emotional wound is being treated like abuse. It's being treated like abuse. The mindset is there's a difference between discomfort and danger. The action is was this person being malicious or just human and flawed, because we are all flawed. No human being is perfect. None of us are. Most of us are flawed. I would say all of us are flawed. Most people just hide it more than others. Now, with the execution of this, heal yourself without the need to make someone the villain all the time. Let me say that again. Heal yourself without needing to make someone the villain all the time. We also have to understand extremes. Extremes blur the middle. That's the problem. The internet examples, they focus on the most toxic, manipulative behavior mindset, and they'll just demonize denies it outright. And a lot of people will do that for their own algorithms, their own sake. The mindset is the most extreme cases don't represent most people. That's the interesting part. A big action here is you got to recenter your lens. We all have a lens in which we see the world, and we may have to recenter our lens. Look at the context, not just the content. Because execution, we don't have to generalize. We don't have to generalize the rare cases as the norm, and that's what's happening. So when it comes to the narcissist problem, the passive is not a narcissist, so on, the quiet or conflict avoidant people are being labeled as narcissists. And not all silence is manipulation. You got to understand that. There are people that use silence in communication, and it is strength. So it should be the concept of differentiating fear-based withdrawal from control-based behavior. So the execution here is you got to use empathy to decode what silence could actually be signaling. And that brings us over to curiosity. Get curious. Curious is a superpower. Curiosity over certainty. People want to be certain about X, Y, Z. People are jumping to conclusions instead of asking the questions. What's the mindset? Well, curiosity is a leadership strength, and curiosity allows you to go deeper and understand fully. So ask, what am I missing about their experience? Create space for complexity, not quick answers, not 5-second internet snapshot judgments. And let's go on to the next one, which is pop psychology is not therapy. The internet trends mimic therapy language without the depth, unless, of course, you see it like someone who says they're a licensed therapist, which I've seen that. And the mindset with this is that language without training is imitation. It's not insight. It's not understanding. It's not discernment. So we have to be able to educate ourselves to real solid sources, not just influencers. All right. Execution is crucial. We have to balance that inspiration with accurate information. So keep in mind, there is the narrative. It gets blown out of proportion. There's what we call the narrative inflation problem, which personal stories online, they inflate conflict for attention. People have what we call a secondary gain. And when it comes to the mindset, just because it went viral doesn't mean it's reliable. So the actions we could take is recognize people's performance versus true, authentic information, rather than just bland, repetitive storytelling. We got to take the internet stories with perspective, not paranoia. And that takes us over to the problem of emotional sobriety. That triggered emotions lead to distorted perception. And the mindset with this is you can feel deeply and still think clearly. And the actions with this is slow down your reactions. Let your mind catch up to your heart. And the execution of this is practice emotional regulation before jumping on somebody's internet label. So we have to restore that human lens. We're losing compassion in the name of clarity. And the mindset is understanding people doesn't excuse behavior, but it grounds us in reality. Most people are a function of their programming. Don't ever forget that. With actions, we can replace judgment with discernment. And when we execute this, we can lead with both empathy and, of course, boundaries. And that's pretty much it for today's episode on the Voices of Victory podcast. I want you to have a great day, an incredible day. I'm going to sip my coffee at 5 a.m. and see you on the next episode.